while you were hanging yourself on someone else's words, dying to believe in what you heard. I was staring straight into the shining sun.
Hi there, I'm Professor Jurus, and I wanted to make you a quick video on how to use the Beseler 45 Enlarger with the condenser lighthouse. This is the condenser lighthouse up here, and that is actually the source of the light. You're going to see in another video how to use the enlarger with a color head on it, but we're going to start with the condenser lighthouse or the condenser enlarger. So to start with, the first thing I will show you is basically how to raise the enlarger up and down. So there's a little toggle switch. It's over on the right hand side, directly underneath this box right here, and the toggle switch will move the enlarger up and down. Okay. Now the reason that you want to raise the enlarger up and down would be to make different size photographs. So when your image is being projected down on the baseboard, this is called the baseboard right here, and you'll be using an easel. So this would be an easel that you would put your paper in, unless you're making like contact prints or something, and then you would be using a piece of glass. But so you would raise the enlarger up and down until you had the right size image that you wanted. Now if you're doing things like photograms or making contact sheets, what you want to do is you want to actually raise the enlarger up very high so that you have a large area of light being projected. And then you also want to make sure, I see a lot of people make this mistake, they try to make contact prints and contact sheets without having the negative carrier in place. So the negative carrier is right here. And the way that you get the negative carrier in and out of the enlarger is over on this side. There's a handle, and you just want to bring that handle down a little bit, and it'll open up the mouth of the enlarger right here, and then you can pull the negative carrier out. Now this part right here is called the stage, and that's where the actual negative carrier slides in and catches. So on the bottom of the negative carrier, there's 4 little pins, and what you want to do when you slide this in there is make sure that the pins catch in the circle that's in there, and then you will have the negative carrier in the right place on the enlarger. Now you also want to make sure that the handle is straight forward when you put it in there, and then what you need to do is simply come back here and close the handle. Now again, the things that some students have done that have actually broken enlargers is take this handle and just crank it way back. You just have to push it back a little bit and be watching so this opens up. And then you can go ahead and slide the negative carrier out, put your negative in there. When you load your negative, you open this up, and there's 4 pins in there that your negative goes, and the negative will actually lay in here emulsion side down, so the emulsion would be facing the bottom, and then the top of the negative, like if you had a photograph of me right now, my head, the top of my head should be placed up at the top toward the handle. And when you're looking at it then, it would appear to be upside down, but when you put it in the enlarger, it's going to actually flip so that you see the image being projected correctly on the easel or on the baseboard, wherever you're doing it. So again, I will slide this in here. Now there's also a condenser scale on the side of the enlarger right here that depends on which size negative you're using. And most of the enlargers in this room or in this dark room are set up for 35 millimeter. So these will be set for 35 millimeter. Now you can't really come to this enlarger and put like a 2 1/4 negative in it, even if you had your own 2 1/4 negative carrier. And the reason is because the lens is actually set up for 35 millimeter. It's a 50 millimeter lens, which is the standard focal length for a 35 millimeter negative. If you go into like a 2 1/4 negative, you need an 80 millimeter lens. If you're printing a 4x5, you need a 150 or 135 millimeter lens. And then you would also change the position of the condenser. Like at the very top right here, there's a little arrow and it says 35 millimeter. When you crank the condenser down, you can crank it down to 2 1/4 square, 2 1/4 by 2 3/4, 2 1/4 by 4 1/4, and all the way down to 4x5. So there's many different places you could set this depending on the size of the negative that you're actually printing. Once you have the enlarger set up though, and you have it the way you want it, like even say you're just making a photogram and you raise the enlarger up as high as it'll go, or high enough that you're projecting amount of light that's going to cover your sheet of paper. What you want to do is, again, like I said earlier, is have the negative carrier in place, And then here's your focusing. And you want to actually look at the light that's being projected, and you'd be doing this in the dark, and make sure your light is sharp, your square of light is sharp and not just some big hazy thing. So by making it sharp, it's going to give you really nice lines and everything. And then the lens is actually under here, and you can open and close the lens to different positions. Now you can hear it click. Now, beginning students a lot of times will ask me, well, what f-stop should I set it on? Well, I said if you need to set it somewhere, maybe start at about 3 stops down. So when you're looking at the light being projected, the brightest area is wide open. So first of all, just look at it and open and close it a couple times. You'll see it get really dark and really bright, the light. So when the light is very bright, maybe just close it down 3 times. And then what I suggest you do is as you take this class and as you start printing, I would actually look at the image that's on the easel, on the sheet of dead paper that you're looking at and focusing on. Look at that image and start to adjust your f-stop for that image. And once you kind of know that it'll print at this tone for 10 seconds, then you'll get really good and you'll save on doing not so many tests by doing that. So again, let's go over things very briefly one more time. This is the switch that makes it go up and down. This is your focusing handle right here. This is the small handle that will actually open and close the negative carrier, so you can take the negative carrier out. The negative carrier goes in the enlarger with the 4 pins down, these little pins that are raised right here. So you actually slide those down and then close that back up. And you could actually focus on either side of the enlarger right here. And then there's a handle that's above the focusing handle that you shouldn't confuse, but that's the one that actually will raise and lower this top bellows so that you can set the condenser. So I hope that helps, and enjoy. Hi there, I'm Professor Jurus, and I wanted to make you a quick video and show you how to go over how to use the Beseler 45 enlarger and use it with the Beseler Dichro 45S color head. So the first thing that you want to do when using this enlarger is you always have to turn the color head on before you turn the timer on. And you'll hear a fan come on there. The color head will not work without the fan being on because it has a very hot bulb in it, so it has to cool the bulb down when the bulb is on. And so we turn that on. Then there's 3 actual dials right here, and the colors are cyan, magenta, and yellow. And we will be using, for black and white 1, we will be using the magenta and the yellow to change the contrast. Now your photography instructor will give you a sheet of paper that will have the correct numbers that you would dial in order to get that filtration to achieve that contrast. So if you wanted, for example, a number 2 contrast, there's a number in here that you would simply dial the magenta to give you that contrast, and then you would do your test prints with that. Now with using the enlarger with the color head on it, it's a little bit different than using it with a condenser head. When using it with a condenser head, we had the top bellows totally extended. The top bellows meaning the bellows above the negative carrier. So when using it with a color head, the top bellows has to always be totally tight, totally as tight as you can make it go. See, you wouldn't want to use it like that right there. You want it to be totally tight before you focus your image. And the reason being is if you don't do that, then you're going to get distortion around the edges of the negative. So the only time that you would ever actually drop that top bellows would be if the enlarger was in the lowest position. So you actually motored it down to like the lowest position, and say you wanted to make like a wallet-sized picture, a very small picture. Then once it's in that low position, you can actually drop that top bellows a little bit and keep focusing, drop it a little bit, keep focusing, drop it a little bit, keep focusing until you get it exactly where you want it to be. And the enlarger is basically the same as I showed you with the condenser. You have your focusing handle on either side. Again, above the focusing handle, this top handle is the one that controls the condenser, but you want to make sure that's always totally condensed or totally compressed, and then also make sure that your color filtration dials are always set on 0 before you start. You know, set your enlarger up, focus, but you have to make sure that you turn this on before you start. Now, one other thing to think about, sometimes students will come to me and say, the bulb's burned out in the color head, and I'll come in here, and one of the things that'll happen is, if you're using a real heavy filtration, and this was especially back when we used to print color negatives in here, when you had a lot of filtration, like say you had 190 magenta and 150 yellow, you could hardly see the negative. So when you wanted to focus and everything, so there's actually a little lever here on the bottom of the color head that if you push the lever back, what it actually does is it actually takes all the filtration out of the way and just white light comes out. Well, if somebody was playing with that or touched that and left it like that, you could come in here and turn the enlarger on, and you wouldn't, and you would say, you would think the bulb is burned out, but this little light right up here would light up on the thing, and it would say white light. So that would tell you that if you turn the enlarger on by the timer and nothing was happening. So what you'd have to do in order to have it come back on is to do that, because what it's not going to do is actually come on with light unless you were already in the on position and then moved it to that. So once it's moved to that, if you turn the enlarger off, the light won't come back on. So that's something that you need to know, that you need to pull this forward, and that's when the filters are engaged on the color head. So anyway, hope that helps. Thank you. Hi there, I'm Professor Jurus, and I wanted to make you a quick video on how to use the GrayLab 450 timer. So to start out with, what we're going to do is actually turn the timer on. So there's a little switch right up here at the top, and you simply flip that switch, and when the switch comes on, then you should see the LED light lit up in the timer. Now, the way the timer works is, what we'll actually do is when it's in the outlet time, you can actually fire the enlarger. Right now I saw the enlarger come on, and it went on for 2 seconds, and then it actually resets itself for 2 seconds or whatever time that you have dialed in. So there's also a focusing light that's down here that you can turn this on, and I see the light come on now, so the light is like permanently on, and that lets me focus the enlarger. One mistake I've seen students make in the past is they think the focusing light is like actually safe, like you can put a piece of paper under there and focus, but you can't. The focusing light is the same exact light bulb as the timed light that you're exposing your paper with. So when you do use the focusing light, you need to actually have a scrap piece of paper that you're focusing on in the easel. But so those are the controls right down here at the bottom. For it says outlet time, and what that means is that the outlet that the enlarger is plugged into, that's the timer for that. But you can just consider that your exposure time. I would have called it exposure time, but they call it outlet time. So there's seconds and tenths of a second, and right now it's set to seconds. If I switch it to tenths of a second, you can see it's at 0.2. This is only set to there, so there's 2.2 right there. If I go to seconds, it's at 22 seconds. So I can get quite a range of time in here by setting it at tenths of a second or at seconds. So I can actually set this to tenths of a second and have two whole seconds there. The display light right here, I can dim that if it's too bright for you, or if you can't see it, you can put it up higher. You can actually turn it off too, so you got to watch sometimes. If you, we used to turn them off sometimes when we would do color, so to make sure that light doesn't fog our paper, but it depends on how actually close you are. And then there's buttons down here. There's metro button, tone button. So let's hit this timer 1 second. So what the tone button does is it actually makes a beeping noise when the exposure is over. What the metro button does is it'll beep for actually every second that you have set. So if I do this, so if you get 20 timers going in here, you can really make some cool noise. So I'm going to actually switch this to off now. I like to leave mine off because I don't like noises, but so turn that off. So again, it's fairly easy to use. The enlarger gets plugged into the top right up here, and then these are your times right here. I generally start with about a 3-second exposure when I'm working in a darkroom, and I'll do a test strip with the timer set at 3 seconds. And anyway, I think that's it about that. So I hope that helps. Thank you.